It's Wednesday, Kaiken, and you know what that means. We're on the entertainment beat tonight with Fuinam Rana, out in the field at the Tailspinner's Respite for a special evening live with Aloe jazz singer Crown. How's it looking out there, Hana?
Well, hey there, Johnny. I'm just outside the weapons check and it's packed here tonight. The Respite always draws a big crowd, but as you know, having a jazz singer guarantees a full house.
You bet it does. So what's the situation on the performances? I heard you've already had a taste of Crown's voice.
I was able to catch one of Crown's earlier numbers, and boy was it spectacular. I'm told the night's finale is supposed to eclipse even that, so I've gotta say, my expectations are high.
I'm hyped to hear about your impressions so far, but I want to take a minute to talk about Aaron, the Respite's mysterious proprietor. You seen him anywhere?
I did, as a matter of fact. I meant to get a few words from him, but he's been in the company of the Secretary of Defense for most of the night. And yeah, you heard right. The Secretary of Defense.
Whoa, crazy. An immigrant from the Shroud hanging out with Secretary Alo Rastarov? The Respite really does live up to its reputation.
Oh yeah, you'll see all kinds here. Company elites mixing with the common man. It really is quite the sight. Nothing like it anywhere else in town.
Well, tell us more about that. The Respite's modeled after high Shroud luxury, isn't that right?
Honestly, I don't know how Aaron managed it. From the moment you leave Meridian Station, it's just stunning architecture and decor all the way to the club. And then, here in the club itself, you really get that exotic vibe. Draped silks, tapestries, incense, the works.
We got any idea how Aaron gets this stuff in through the embargo? Or where the guy even came from?
Well, he's not telling, but the story goes he hired some exiled mercenary to help him make the trip.
That would be Ureli, the bartender?
That's right. She's become something of a minor celebrity here in her own right. The people love having drinks made by a mysterious Shroud ex-soldier. Maybe even an ex-Rajin warrior. Where else can you get that kind of spectacle?
No kidding. I'm guessing the embargo's luxurious exception exists for just that reason. It'd definitely be a shame to lose a place like this where all types can come together.
Definitely. Which, speaking of types, we've even got Jazzrunners. I'm looking at the Jiv Blaster handling door security right now. They may be shady mercs, but you've gotta appreciate a guy like Jiv who's got better public opinion polling than most politicians.
Kinda crazy that unpopular corpo families like the Sliavs or the Nask can't get their hands on someone like Jiv to ride his reputation, but Aaron can. Guy must be paying an arm and a leg.
Well, whatever he's doing, Jiv being here certainly lends the place some star power. Not to mention a sense of safety. No one's gonna mess with security arranged by Jiv Blaster. Especially other Jazzrunners. Let's see if we can get a word from him. Hello? Hello? Jiv? Mr. Snow Thunder, I snooze. We have a few questions.
I don't care if you're Cal himself. Turn around. You see how nice and orderly that line is? I know you didn't just step out of it to gum up my flow.
Oh, we already checked in. We just wanted a
Well, hello then, Ice News listeners. Come to the Tailspinner's Respite where you can follow the #1 rule of not bothering security unless you want to get tossed out on your ass.
Whoa, you alright there, Hana?
I don't know, Johnny. You just manhandled us back into the club and... I think I might have a crush.
Classic Jiv. Well, that's a great segue to get back to tonight's performances. If I remember correctly, you were at that concert for Bella Fizzy a few seasons ago. How's that compare to what you've heard of Crown so far?
Phew. Getting my audio engineer to fan me. I didn't expect to get all worked up from a scolding by Mr. Snow Thunder himself. What I'm feeling is a good illustration of what jazz singers can do to you.
How do you mean? Hot and bothered?
Well, they defy expectations. Let's just say Crown is a good name, because where Bella Fizzy has control and elegance, Crown is the king of vocal power. Fizzy arouses the senses like gentle nails through fur. Crown is electricity that tickles your nerves and jolts you into bliss.
Well, damn. Is it just about their voice, or does the performance matter too?
It's the whole experience. I don't know how singers control the jazz the way they do, but each one has their own unique way of handling it, so it's not just about the voice. And good thing it's not physically addicting, or I'd be in trouble.
Me too. So, is that the appeal of singers over jazz tech? That's a big ticket price just to ride a high for the night.
Well, I'm no technician, but from what I hear, jazz tech can do funny things to the mind when it's physically integrated. So without messing with that stuff or company-approved uppers, jazz singers are the way to go.
Well, damn. Then it really is quite gracious of the Allos to lend their star performer to a venue like this one, where everyone can get a taste.
That's right, Johnny. Singers are normally booked by the big performance halls with crazy expensive tickets. That's why seeing Bella Fizzy was such a huge deal for me.
What family is her patron anyways? The Briga?
That's right. The chairman's own family. I actually think it's pretty cool how they move around between families until they find one that really understands their vision. You get a great sense of the patron family's sensibilities from a singer's performance style.
Well, given how much the Allos love to put on a show of glitz and glamour whenever they're involved in something, I'm sure tonight's finale will be bombastic.
Johnny, I'm so hyped. The crowd's practically buzzing with excitement. I can't wait to tell you and all our listeners about it in the follow-up later tonight.
Fantastic. On that note, we'll let you get to it, Hannah. Enjoy the show, sink into the moment, and memorize every detail so we get a high-fidelity recounting. And speaking of high fidelity, on to some SimStim news. Record sales today rocked the SimStim playback charts when the VNet Weekly Supers saw its first Mondaily. Mid-morning jazz caf on the couch with my Darwolf roommate in our cozy downtown apartment, popping right into the number 36 spot this week. This bestsellers list is usually full of high adrenaline thrill-alongs, luxury live-ins, and, let's be honest listeners, spicier intimate experiences. But Mondailies are by no means a new phenomenon, and in fact, a good number of them have been hovering just out of reach of that coveted top 50 for quite some time now. And I don't have to remind my faithful audience that Ice News has had a finger on the pulse when we featured Kriat Lebrock on Bringing the Heat's Wednesday night show 4 months ago. It's safe to say we've had our eyes on this for quite a while. But this milestone for the SimStim industry signals an undeniable paradigm shift for audiences and tastemakers alike. You hear it here every day, Kaiken. I don't gotta remind you, these troubling times are tough on all of us. But it really makes you wonder, what does that say about us as a society when we're starting to slot out our typical jazzed up joyrides and looking for escapism out of something calmer, more low-key that some of us already see, live, and breathe all the time? Well, who better to speak to this rising trend in virtual vicarism than the Mondaily mogul themselves? It's your favorite and mine, listeners, Joyboy Anjel Jemini. Welcome to the studio, and can I just say, your feathers are looking amazing today. That is a tremendous color palette you've got going on.
Oh, that's incredibly kind of you to say, thank you.
I wish our listeners could see your makeup and outfit today. You are absolutely stunning.
Well, if you'd allow it, and if the wonderful people at ICE would allow me to do a small stim stream in this room, I could share with them right now.
Oh, my producers, okay, they're shaking their head. We'll put it on the record that you were generous enough to extend the offer to us, but we'll have to unfortunately decline, Angel. Trade secrets and all, you know how that goes.
I understand.
You've got a pretty distinct and alluring appearance, if I do say so myself. I'll bet that's hard to hide. How often do people recognize you on the street?
Oh, I get recognized quite often by fans and even folks who only occasionally watch Mondailies. I don't have a problem saying hello to them because that's part of doing a Mondaily.
You're such a prominent Mondaily artist. Do people ever ask to be in Mondailies with you?
Oh, all the time, Johnny, and well, sometimes they will and sometimes they won't. It depends on whether or not I'm recording a SimStim at the time, after all.
And SimStims, just for our listeners who might have been living under a rock for the past several decades, are a pretty exciting way to enjoy experiences that people don't run into on a daily basis. Wouldn't you agree? What are some of your favorites, Angel?
Well, on a daily basis, that is absolutely the way that I do my SimStims, Johnny. I choose to record activities that I feel are, as the name implies, mundane daily. But my favorite activities are definitely ones that involve just seeing the wonderful streets and being amongst the people.
You bring up an important distinction there, Mondaily versus SimStim. To you, Angel, what's the difference? How do you differentiate what you do from what most SimStims have on offer?
Well, Johnny, with a Mondaily, my goal is to give my viewers the authentic, real experience that I am having in that moment. And that might be a joyous experience, that might be a sad experience, but there's no faking that, there's no pretending it's anything other than what it is. SimStims, at least in my experience and views, are a little bit more performative. Now, that's not to say that I don't perform, but I don't pretend that I'm feeling something that I'm not.
That's interesting, Angel. You talk about pretense and authenticity, and I kind of wonder, just in general, how do you inject your artistry, your authenticity, into SimStims as a medium that a lot of people consider to be pretty superficial and escapist?
Well, that's where the Mondailies come in. They're giving viewers an opportunity to see the world around them for the beauty and the wonder and the happiness that is there. And there's no reason to pretend it's anything else. We live in such a wonderful world, Johnny. There's so much to enjoy about what we do every day.
You know, one thing I'm hearing you say, Angel, and about wonder and joy, there's something that I think all our listeners are would like to know. Why Joyboy? You don't really put out what other Joyboys are doing. What's up with that? Don't you feel like that must be confusing for people?
Well, I admit, I was not fully aware of what the term meant when I first started using it. I hadn't looked into it very much, and I assumed that it was people spreading joy. And that's what I'm trying to do as well, Johnny. Spread a little joy. Well, I now know better, but the term is part of who I am. I am still spreading joy. It's of a different sort, but I can't give it up. That's what my audience knows me for.
We'll put a notif in that for now and circle back later. But I'm curious. I'm very interested in your background. I see here, want to remind the listeners, you grew up in Giddown. I grew up myself just a couple districts over in Solstice Bay. Right on the edge of it, though, on East Lock Street. You know that part. I had it rough just like you. It was practically the scrum. I just tell people Solstice Bay because if they're not from there, they don't know East Lock. But I know you know it. It's actually a pretty rough neighborhood. How did you get started coming up from an environment just like that?
Oh, I know exactly what you're talking about, Johnny. That must have been so hard for you growing up. And look at where you are now. Oh, everyone should be so impressed by how well you've done. Well, when I got started, and I think about coming from those rough days, I think about how what I'm doing, it gives those people hope as well. It lets them see that you can come from these difficult times, you don't even know what you're going to be having the next day. And all you really have to do is try something new. Oh, I'm not gonna kid you, I'm not gonna pretend anybody can become a sim streamer, Johnny. It's not easy. Every day is full of challenges, and I have to make sure that on a bad day, I'm still being me, and I'm still going out there for everyone. But there's something we can all do. There's something we can all be that we can share that nobody else can do, and that's wonderful. And so, my message to the people who came from the streets, for people like us, Johnny, they should look at you, they should look at me, and they should think, if I want it, I just have to keep working for it, and I can make it too.
It sounds a little bit like that may have been what you were thinking about when you came out with one of the first Mondailies that ever put you on the map, just 3 years ago, with 27 million views already. Can you tell the listeners what went into planning that and why it's still so important for you?
Well, not much went into planning that. That first Mondaily, that one I remember the most. It was so important to me. I had just gotten my sim deck and I wanted nothing more than just to go out and show everybody what I was going to be doing, who I was. So I went to a thrift store and, I found the most wonderful dress. I didn't think it would be affordable. I had just spent so much. But it was on sale. They were trying to clear out more space in the store, and even better, the dress fit. I took it home and I cried. Oh, how I cried with joy at that dress.
I feel like you're glossing over a pretty important detail of that first Mondaily that you put out. That extra little bit of spice that people came back for more of. Why don't you tell us about that chance encounter on the street on your way home?
Wasn't anything that exciting, as far as I recall. It was just a lovely stranger who saw me carrying the dress and made a comment about how it seemed a little bit too pricey for somebody of my economic background of the time. But I told them where I got it from, and, well, I wouldn't say they were happy, but they didn't stop me. They let me go my way.
In a rough place like Giddown, you might be used to experiences like that, but, people unlike you and I might not be so familiar with that kind of an exchange, and I think that excited a lot of people who hadn't had that experience before.
I suppose that is quite true. I had always thought that people just had been so happy for me, the same way that I had been happy then. Well, perhaps it's both things. It's so hard to know with Mondailies what the audience is really enjoying.
It really is impressive how much thought you seem to put into these Mondailies. But I gotta know, Angel, what do you feel makes one of your live stream performances stand out from your typical SimStim? Why do you think people tune in?
I think it's because they enjoy the authenticity. I think they like just seeing somebody who's not putting on a lot of airs, who's not trying to be somebody they're not. I don't put on a character, Johnny, when I go on. I'm just Angel Jemini. I'm who you see right here. I'm who you see on my streams. I'm who you'd see on the street or on the net. I'm just me, and that's the person I'm putting forward. And when so many other sim streamers and so many other personalities are out there being characters, being somebody they're not, well, somebody genuine, I think, really resonates.
You're so right, Angel. Authenticity, being genuine, that's super important to me. I know exactly what you mean, but let's be real. It's true that sim streams are usually the kind of thing where someone watching through one, whether it's their first time or their 50th, maybe might not think twice about who's behind the sim deck. But when you're seeing the world through someone else's eyes, you get to fantasize for a bit what it's really like to be them. And come on, Angel, I can see it with you right here in front of me. I think it's pretty obvious. Wouldn't you admit there's a special something about you that your audience might find desirable, that makes you unique?
Well, I think, if I'm being honest, I stand out a little bit more than a lot of the other Mondaily creators and sim streamers. Well, with these feathers of mine, they can't help but be seen.
You do have a pretty unique appearance. Like I said, I can't take my eyes off of you right now, Angel. But I gotta say, you must take a certain amount of pride, and maybe even jealousy, at all these other Mondaily artists seeing success on the charts. How much do you care about what's trending when you're thinking about your next project and what you're going to produce?
Oh, I would never be jealous of the others. It's not as if we're in competition with one another. We're all simply trying to, well, bring a little joy to all of the audience out there. But when it comes to trends, I definitely do pay attention. They're useful for creating stim streams that aren't just Mondailies. The trends are, well, the audience wants to know how I will feel about them, and so I will give them what they want.
What's a trend that you thought was particularly interesting, especially for your brand, Angel?
Oh, I thought the open flame trend was quite intriguing when it happened. I remember it was a silly little thing to see how close one would be willing to get to a fire before they were burned, and if it would hurt and how that felt, and the audience seemed quite interested in the danger of it all, the heat. Well, fire is not something to be treated lightly, Johnny. There were many who got burned during those trends.
No kidding. That was pretty exciting to watch sometimes, but I don't know that I'd ever do that myself. But I gotta ask, Angel, technically, Wouldn't putting your hand in an open flame not really be a mundaily? I mean, I don't do that on a daily basis.
Oh, that wouldn't be a mundaily, Johnny. That is a different stim stream. The trending ones, well, sometimes I do worry that if I don't do them, my audience will be a little less inclined to stay for the mundailies. I'm not overly fond of the trends, but they have their place.
So, as a self-styled joy boy, you're thinking a lot about what these other creators are doing and what's popular and what people want to see, especially as mundailies are more of a presence on the weekly supers. So how do you respond to criticism that you're a sellout or that you've compromised your vision?
I would say that I've never done such a thing. I would say that the fact that I use the name Joyboy is proof of that, even. I have never done what the regular Joy Boys do. I have continued my mundailies, and I shall continue to do them without change.
I do want to talk about that again just a little bit here. What it really means to be a joy boy. The numbers don't lie. We both know the kind of stuff that regularly tops the weekly supers. Sex sells. Does clinging to the Joy Boy label ever cause awkward situations for you?
There are the occasional commenter that would prefer that I do something a little bit more in line with the regular Joy Boys, and I will not do that for them. I maintain that I bring joy, and that is why I will continue to use the term.
And as a joy boy making these mundailies, it does seem like a pretty cute, low-effort way to get into producing SimStims, and I'd probably get into it myself if I had the time and the lack of, shall we say, public attention that you do. You must do something with all that spare time. What does Joyboy Anjel Jemini do for fun, huh?
Well, I oftentimes find myself going back to the thrift stores and seeing what else I can find. They may have been the start of my mundaily success, but they're still my personal place for rest and relaxation. I love seeing what clothing is available and what outfits I can coordinate. They bring out my feathers when they're just right.
You ever run into some pretty weird people when you go to thrift stores and other places like that?
Oh, all the time, Johnny. But they are people who are once like me, hard on their luck and looking for something that will bring them a little bit of happiness in the hard times. And they might be strange, they might occasionally argue about who saw that dress first, who would look better in it, but, well, there's nothing wrong with that. They should be allowed to have it once in a while.
You do find some pretty choice outfits, Angel, and you wear them well, I'll say that. You've said repeatedly in other interviews, and definitely in this one, that you like to focus on what's wonderful. Let's be real. What's more wonderful than the raw carnal passion that's pretty unique to getting cozy with a SimStim?
Johnny, what are you trying to say about me?
I'm just saying, isn't a sexy encounter kind of like a mundaily?
I suppose it could be framed as such a thing, but I would never.
Well, again, I mean, numbers don't lie. If you gotta do what's successful, what works for you, wink wink, might be something people want to see.
I absolutely will do no such thing. If there are others that wish to sell themselves for sex, they are more than welcome to do so. But I will not compromise my mundailies.
Alright, well, Angel, what's one of your favorite mundailies that you've seen that wasn't one of yours?
Oh, that's a good question. Oh, I think my favorite that I saw was one where the stimmer was at the grocery store and, they had seen a child knock over an aisle full of cereal, and they had quite a good laugh about it. Fortunately, it seemed the staff also did. So, no harm befell the small child, but, that was quite entertaining.
Let's take a minute to circle back to talking about how you managed to rise up through the industry. 99.8 of all the SimStim artists who've made it on the VNet Weekly Supers for the past 5-6 years, as long as I can remember, have been house-sponsored. It seems to me, Angel, that your lack of a house sponsorship is almost like a point of pride for you. But jazz singers, like our featured performer this week, Crown, are pretty strictly tied to that kind of a working relationship. What's that like for you to not have that kind of safety or fallback?
I try not to think about it too much, Johnny. If anything were to happen, well, I'm just thankful to everybody that if one day I wasn't able to stream anymore, I'd still be okay and I'd still have enough to give back to others. It is honestly a source of worry and concern. What happens if one day my audience doesn't love the Mondailies anymore? They don't think they're getting the authentic experience with me. And well, were it to ever come to that, well, I've thought about signing with a house if they would have me. I really have. But I don't know if I could. I think I would just continue. And if people came to watch, that would be wonderful. And if they didn't, that would still be wonderful.
I know that I have a lot that I have to think about as a performer, as a creator, as a personality on the net, and that's a lot to deal with. When houses are serving as patrons and essentially agencies for so much of the entertainment industry, they don't have to focus on things like marketing or promotion or booking gigs, which gives them the time to focus on their craft. Angel, what do you do when you have to manage all of that yourself?
Oh, I don't have to manage as much as you think I do, Johnny. I don't do my own bookings. I have people come to me, and they ask me if I can come because they know that if I'm sharing the stream of their event, the communities will come watch, and there will be more advertising for them. Why, if anything, I'm the advertiser for these events sometimes. But I don't think of it as advertising. I think of it as sharing.
I read on the net about one of your followers who tried to ask you for one of your feathers. Can you tell me more about how that went down?
Oh, it's an odd request. I admit that it's sort of like if somebody were to ask you for a claw clipping, Johnny. Would you give them that?
Wow.
Would you feel uncomfortable?
I don't just walk around with claw clippings on me, but I mean, molting is pretty natural, right? Like, why turn away an adoring fan like that?
Molting is quite natural, but I can't just do that on the spot. Well, if somebody were to claim one of my feathers, that would be a different story.
And Angel, how do you keep fame, however that manifests for you, from getting to your head?
Well, some days it's hard to resist the allure of having all of these eyes watching me, but I just remind myself what I'm doing it for. It's to show my audience what it's like on the day-to-day, and, well, with a name like a Mondaily, I have to keep myself as mundane as well as I can. I can't become elitist, I can't become above my audience, I must live amongst them. Otherwise, they won't believe the authenticity of what I show them.
And one last question for you, Angel. If you had to do it all over again, what would you change?
I think the only thing I would change would be starting sooner. I should have gotten that sim deck as much younger age. I don't know if things would have worked out the same way, but I know I would have been happier sooner, even without an audience.
All right, well, thank you for your time, Angel. I'm glad we had the opportunity to share our authentic viewpoints with the listeners. It's a real pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you for having me, Johnny, and I do hope you will reconsider a little bit what you thought of me before.
I guess, probably shouldn't ask what you're doing afterwards, huh?
I will be preparing myself for a stimming later, Johnny.
Okay, well, you know what they say, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. This was your Entertainment Beat on Bringing the Heat, and you've been listening to Ice News, keeping it cool. I'm Zhonny Inferno, and you know where to find me.
Support for NLN comes from Mindy Mundy, an independent collective of SimStim artists creating Mondaily content to unchain the mind. Passion-powered and community-funded, Mindy Mundy provides a safe space outside of corporate influence to embrace the moment, empower the self, and emancipate the soul. Mindy Mundy, where living life is living art. Welcome back, listeners, to Nu Lios News, where we report on the value of art with journalistic integrity and a hunger for truth over transaction, substance over celebrity. I'm your host, Sliavinnefiang, ready with research, facts, and the news you need to prepare for a dangerous, changing world. You're listening to NLN. The Allos, one of the most successful company families in modern memory, are famous for their commitments to military and administrative service. But is it a history of authentic goodwill or calculated intergenerational psyops? What can the ascendancy of the Allos tell us about the paradox of the projection of civil servitude haunted by the specter of dark ambition? On today's Things That Hide in the Dark, we follow last episode's focus on the Briga family's century-long hold on chairmanship to begin a series of deep dives into the Allos' enduring popularity. Episode 1, Uncivilized Service, the unruly rise of the Allos. Our story begins with the scandal of Allo Tigdarag, the architect of the modern Office of Defense and great-great-grandfather of current Allo patriarch Alarastrolf. In the year 884 PSE, Secretary Allo Tigdarag, or Secretary Tig, presided over a family barely clinging to relevance. Their sole domain was that of Cimmerian Logistics and Weapons Solutions, or CWS, the Liosian military. However, with no external powers in a position to threaten Liosian dominance, the Office of Defense was considered the least of all company-elected bodies. In the words of a contemporary NLN broadcaster, it was the final seat to be held by any family. It meant one foot dangling over the abyss. Secretary Teague understood his family's irrelevance was becoming an existential threat. One poor calculation, and the Allos would be retired as a company power, effectively removing them from the upper echelons of Liosian society. As summarized in his now famous quotation, "A company family can never settle, can never rest. Should they ever cease jockeying for position, fighting for their vision of civil prosperity, then they are doomed to lose the right to fight at all. In the world of Liosian politics, capitulation means more than mere surrender. Capitulation means death." So, in early 885 PSE, he famously gambled. In what is now known as the Crimson Coalition merger, Secretary Teague began a hostile and bloody takeover of LWS, the Liosian Constabulary, then part of the Office of Security and Transportation. While successful, the collateral damage of innocent Liosian lives reflected poorly in public opinion, plummeting the Allos into infamy. But as the popular saying goes, all press is good press, and so Secretary Teague leveraged the family's new visibility to change tactics. In 886 PSE, he publicly shamed and politically outmaneuvered the Office of Justice and Telecommunications to take VSI, Liosian intelligence. Coercion was used for sepulchre cybersecurity, seduction for Aether industrial science. Later, payoffs and apologies to those affected by the Crimson Coalition merger allowed that stain to be forgotten, replaced by the celebration of a handsome and camera-ready underdog. By 887, in 3 short years, the Allo family had succeeded in not just stepping back from the brink, but wresting power from every other major family aside from the Briga and the Nask. While Allo Tigdarag's ambitions had upset the status quo, such takeovers are not unheard of in the history of company reorganization. After some negotiation and assurances, it was agreed the Office of Defense would be allowed to keep its new acquisitions if the Allos took no further hostile actions. But by his own words, Secretary Teague had no interest in settling. At the end of 887, he issued an ultimatum to the full board of offices. Either elect him as chairman, or he would take it by force. In some ways, civil war had already begun. A massive public relations campaign continued to paint the Allos as underdog heroes, rising from the ashes of irrelevance to take over for the benefit of all those who had suffered at the hands of company abuses, just as they had suffered. And it worked. According to opinion polling data collected at the time, the Allos made the company's enforcement feel like the people's enforcement, through a generous handling of imports, cheaper goods, a permissive regulation of jazz technologies, a decline in petty arrests. Any levers of power the Allos held that affected public life, they relaxed. So as far as the public opinion at the time was concerned, as historian Sanshin Ora reports in her book, The Highest Houses, this was commonwealth, sharing wealth with the commons. In Ora's words, the Allos became a family so cunningly aware of the power of optics, they projected their elevated affluence as if they were proles who had won the lottery, in increasingly gaudy, crass, and ostentatious ways, effectively a poor man's fantasy of what it means to be rich, so relatable, almost democratic. In short, they didn't fly high over the city in the newest Felix luxury hovercraft, essentially invisible. They walked down its streets like everyone else. They just did it draped in gold. So when the question of which family is most prepared to rule the city began to bubble up from mayors and aldermen at the same time as Secretary Teague's ultimatum, there was a clear answer. Only the Allos had personally invested in the citizens' daily needs, visibly used the same infrastructure, understood the common wolf. They had crossed the lines of class, until that point, a mutually established boundary for the corporate elite. But that boundary existed for a reason. Today, many corporate families openly display their wealth for the spectacle and entertainment of media consumption. Prior to the late 800s, however, the veil of corporate power lended it mystique. The less the public knew of elite excesses, the less likely they were to stoke the flames of revolution. So, something had to be done about the Allos. This feature will continue next week in Episode 2, Dark Auditors Cast No Shadows, The Creation of Coordinates. Tune in for more with us, or listen on demand at the NLN subdomain for Things That Hide in the Dark. Support for NLN is brought to you by Studio M3, Nu Lios' sole distributor of all jazz singer records. Now releasing Crown's newest album, Synth City, including the hit single, Not the End.
Eyes full of sin, you led me in.
Supplies subject to allo dispensation. Studio M3 is neutral in all family affairs. There's a scene in Henri Casseb's 770 PSU drama, The Common Nemesis, that takes place at a public meeting. The residents of fictional borough Granite Heights are trying to prevent a local grocer from telling the truth about a company fabrication facility that's producing poisoned goods. That's the moment when, one recent evening, an activist linked to the CyberSea Collective stood up from their seat in the audience. It was during a press night for the current production running at the Cavern Sun in Solstice Bay.
We object to the silencing of whistleblowers.
As anonymity is a cornerstone of the collective's operations, the activist wore a hollow jazz mask and has yet to be identified by authorities, except by the prominent slogan printed on their shirt, "We are the tide," a reference to the opening line of the CSC's manifesto. As vast as the cybersea, we are the tide, and we are coming. Several more activists joined in the disruption before security forces chased them out. For their safety, management moved to clear the stage, but the actors chose to stay, remaining in character. Much of the audience would later reveal they believed the interruption to be part of the production. That's because the tenor of the protest reflected the theme of the show.
While we don't agree with the collective's typical methods, This play is all about the challenge of expressing truth to a public unwilling to hear it.
That's stage manager Goa Naita, who watched on from the wings while the disruption unfolded. Actor Celie Lawton, in an interview on the 26th Hour Late Show, elaborated on this sentiment.
We'd be hypocrites if we didn't support the collective's message here. Communicating inconvenient truths to the public is important. The distinction is that the company is necessary to the survival of our society, or in the case of the common nemesis, Granite Heights. So we have to navigate the nuance of holding company abuses to account without obliterating the system that supports us.
CyberSea Collective protests and anti-company actions are on the rise. The more shocking and intrusive they are, the more attention they get. Activists have hacked hollow sculptures and other digital art installations to display provocative imagery. They've also co-opted live SimStim broadcasts to force users to feel the experiences of drug addicts or the dying who can't afford medical care, among other art-focused disruptions. While these actions are meant to showcase the harms of company negligence, they often spark public outrage. Some audience members at the Cavern Sun production stood and harassed the activists until they were ushered off.
The pushback only further serves to underscore their message.
Raya Cowlin is the director of Critical Overthink, a nonprofit focused on social justice, whose hope is that the general public takes a more open-minded and measured approach.
We have to be careful not to prove the collective's point that sufficient groupthink, inspired by propaganda or mass market appeal, influencers or the like, can cause us to deride not just the activists themselves, but whatever truth they're attempting to communicate.
When asked about how the average Laosian should approach the issues of activism and negligence, Raya Cowlin continued,
The message matters, of course, but engagement matters more. So participate in politics. Vote. Ignoring obvious exploitation will only harm us all in the long term. The company is us, and we are the company. There is no surviving alone.
We interrupt this broadcast to bring you breaking news. A critical flaw has been alleged in the newest release of the Shinkeisei Mark III Neural Cyberdeck. Some users have reported bizarre and purportedly deadly visual feedback. Kensei denies these claims, but recommends all users verify their Cyberdeck software is valid and current. The newest update is now available for purchase on the local net at the Kensei domain.
Stand clear of the closing doors, please.
Advocates for public transportation often promote practical advantages, affordability, accessibility, that tranquil sense of oneness in a sea of churning bodies, avoiding the chance of mid-air hover collisions and the following spiral of death. Reduce traffic. But Zan Bunnock, 22-year-old resident of Gidown, likes the Laosian Citizen Transit Service for a different reason.
I'm just a little puppy. I'm just a little guy. The LCTS is perfect for a pupper like me who just wants to be told what to do. Some of us weren't made to make hard choices.
Bunnock is one of many in a recent wave of Laosians who have given up personal vehicle ownership in favor of public transit. According to data released by the Office of Security and Transportation, ridership of the LCTS has increased 12% in the last 6 months. The change appears to have begun with a pilot program at Grand Meridian Station to provide automated ticketing and directions through Loom integration and personal cyberdecks. In a Laosian Citizen Central University study released last week, users of the new system have reported a marked reduction in anxiety and improved mood while traveling. Transit officials have agreed with the university study's findings, but have disagreed with the university's conclusion that credits the working AI Rowan and its reassuring personality with the pilot program's success. An LCTS spokesperson said,
While we are glad the public has taken to our representational and observational authoritative neighbor so well, we must disagree with certain publications as to the extent of Rowan's impact on our programs. The success of our new automation initiatives is the result of bespoke ticketing solutions and effortless navigation made possible by integration with the Loom and other personal management software. Rowan is merely a small part of that fully customizable experience.
Aw, they're just in denial.
Bunnock belongs to a recently created public transit fan domain on the local net called Minions of Rowan, with members numbering in the several thousands. Morrowians, as they call themselves, routinely talk about their Rowan travel experiences, trade their customized travel routines, write fan fiction, and even post fan art of Rowan's cyberspace avatar, a large, heroic-looking wolf of old-world mythology.
I love the strong, dominant voice of Rowan whispering straight into my brain. Traveling is such an enjoyable experience now. He helps me feel safe and, really safe. I surrender to his guidance as much as possible.
On the advice of Bunnock and other so-called Morrowians, we decided to interview Rowan directly.
Never fear, traveler. Just listen to my voice and let the LCTS provide. That's right. You're such a good pup. You don't have to fret about any hard choices. I'll make all of those for you. Just tell me your destination, and then sit down, relax, and ride.
Support for NLN is brought to you by the large organic organizational model by Akasha Information Services. With the Loom, there are no loose threads. Enjoy bespoke memory storage and data synthesis on demand. Feel free to think less. A recent raid by armed mercenaries on the Liosian Information and Operations Network system that left 7 office workers dead continues to prompt anger from the People's Assembly. The slain workers are among 20 company employees killed in what are believed to be tit-for-tat skirmishes in ongoing intra-company disputes.
This is hardly the first time the People's Assembly has expressed frustration with this sort of thing.
That's Astoriuda of Muddied Waters, a political think tank.
Centuries of public complaints regarding violent power struggles, always alleged, of course, bear witness to that. What's different this time is the bald overtness of it.
Secretary Dengon at a recent press conference had this to say.
It's an utter lack of propriety. Hiring jazzrunners with no compunctions against attacking civilian office workers is already egregious. But targeting public infrastructure, like the Lines Network, is an act of terrorism.
When asked who she thinks might have been behind the attack or any possible motives, Dengon was not able to provide a clear answer.
It's difficult to say. The whole point of hiring mercenaries is to maintain some level of discretion. Whatever the case, the investigation is in the hands of the authorities now.
That's just corporal talk for it. It's being swept under the rug,
said Jiv Blaster, famed and retired jazzrunner, currently head of security at the Tailspinner's Respite.
Now, I ain't one for big public statements, but I do want the people to understand one thing. As a mercenary, there's no money in doing more than what you're told. If people died, well, sometimes bad luck happens, but the more likely case is, it's what they were told to do.
When asked if he had ever been hired as part of an ongoing corporate rivalry, or if he had any information about the current situation, Blaster simply smiled.
Couldn't say. I ain't a charity. You want information, talk to a fixer.
This is an ongoing story. Thank you for listening to Nu Lios News. A short reminder that this station is fueled by the power of local support. Individual contributions and business sponsorships make up 90% of our annual budget. Even a handful of bit credits will help maintain the quality of journalism you've come to expect, so consider making a small pledge to our upcoming seasonal fund drive. Listener patronage allows us to remain independent so we can focus on the facts. The very facts you need to keep up with a dangerous, changing world. Because remember, we're in this together. Trust me on this. Really. You've been listening to Sliavinnefiang, live from our Arcology studio. And this is NLN.